It seems that most people know, like, nothing about nothing. And I mean, that's not two negatives making a they know everything. It's just, it's not the way anything works.
Swagger down the street with your red lips and funky beat. You better hold your head up to the sky. I'm gonna roll with you till the day I die.
And that still's wrong. It's meant to be a thing that's doing a thing, and that thing that it's meant to be doing is not doing the thing. So it goes from music in the title to this, where there's nothing. I mean, there is music in the background, but there's not the title music that then is meant that I can turn off at the right time or fade out or do something. Anyway, not my point. So I keep getting in discussions with people about things like I work on suspension and CV shafts and wheel bearings and brakes and things like that. And when I mention issues with the new thing, the EVs, that people seem to think of this revolutionary thing, that an EV, an electric vehicle, is a completely different animal than what they call ICE. Everyone's like really proud of themselves. It's an ICE, an internal combustion engine vehicle. Oh, fuck off. It's just a car. They're exactly the same things with a slightly different power source. The difference between an EV and an ICE is essentially the same as the difference between a petrol car and a diesel car. The only real difference is the fuel source and the motor that makes the wheels turn. So from the transaxle, which an EV still has, which converts circular motion in one direction to circular motion in another direction at a different speed, so maybe you could just call it a differential, but it's a transaxle. It's got the final drive unit and the primary drive unit in a single thing. That's a transaxle. So it still has a transaxle like any front-wheel drive car built over the last 40, 50 years. It's just the motor that spins it is a different one. And then you've got these big, giant, resource-consuming battery in the bottom of them. But other than those two things, all the rest of them's the same. Still got tires, still got brakes. Okay, the way that the brakes work is slightly different, but they're still exactly the same brakes, made out of exactly the same materials that might last slightly or even substantially longer than on a regular car. But if people slowed the hell down, brakes on regular cars would last a hell of a lot longer anyway. You should never have a brake rotor warp. You should never have your steering wheel shake because your brakes are warped. That means you've been braking way too hard too often. If you get off your fucking phone, pay attention to what's going on around you, leave ample space ahead of you, and pay attention to what all the other cars are doing, you should never, ever stuff your brakes, and they should last a substantial, people going, oh, I've got 100,000 miles out of brakes on my Tesla. Okay, but I've gotten almost that much, or I know people that have gotten almost that much out of conventional brakes on a conventional car because I don't drive like a race car driver. Anyway, not my point. People seem to think that these EVs are revolutionary things, that everything about them is different, but most modern cars have stupid Wi-Fi connections and big screens and electric brakes and, hand brakes. Everything in them is computer controlled. They've got differential braking for stability control and all the other stuff. Just the facilitation of some of the emergency features on an EV is slightly different than on an ICE car, a conventional engined car. But everyone goes on and on and on about how completely and utterly different these things are, and they aren't. It's still a disposable consumer item that if we all buy, it's going to do nothing for anything. It's not going to stop there being giant holes dug in the ground. It's not going to stop people just throwing shit away after a few years. And even then, lithium-ion batteries have been around for like more than 30 years, and they've still got 1,000 cycle. Oh, well, they last 400,000 Ks. Okay, but that's only because the batteries are giant, so the amount of cycles that they need. So if you can get 400 miles out of a charge, right, that's 1,000 charges to get you 400,000 miles. It's not rocket science. It's also not innovative anything. It's just slightly different packaging for 30-year-old technology. So it just shits me to tears. Someone saying I'm scared of EVs because I'll be out of a job. Hey, I work on suspension, brakes, drive shafts, bearings, all of the things that all wear out exactly the same, whether it's an EV or anything. It's okay, like I did quantify the brakes. But wheel bearings aren't going to last forever. All our roads are fucked. It's not like EVs are suddenly floating over the sky, over the ground and avoiding all the potholes. No. And their suspension is literally identical to everything else. I don't know. It just shows me that people know nothing about nothing. And if they did know anything about anything, they'd stop using their fucking phones while they're driving.